They put handcuffs on a mechanic. 5 minutes later, the Pentagon was on the phone. By the time the sheriff realized who he arrested, it was too late. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a woman with grease on her hands. She was a decorated Navy sniper who had saved generals in war zones and built an underground network that spanned from veterans' shelters to Capitol Hill. What started as a parking lot misunderstanding turned into a national scandal that took down corrupt officials, exposed a system rigged against veterans, and ended with one question echoing across America. How many heroes have we silenced before we knew their names? If you think this is just another case of mistaken identity, you're not ready for what comes next. But first, leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. It happened on a Wednesday. Bright sun, full parking lot, and the kind of afternoon that felt too ordinary for anything big to happen. Sarah had just grabbed a gallon of oil and a pack of gum when she saw them. Two men crowding an elderly woman near her car. No yelling, no obvious fight, just that subtle kind of threat you only recognize if you've been trained to spot danger in silence. She walked toward them, calm, confident, no phone in hand, no panic in her step. One man turned to say something, then froze. The look in Sarah's eyes made him forget whatever lie he had planned. They ran. The woman was shaken but safe. Sarah thought it was over. Then the sirens came. Officer Johnson jumped out before the cruiser fully stopped, looked around, saw the old woman, the two men in the distance, and Sarah standing nearby. "You, hands where I can see 'em," he barked. She raised her hands, still holding the receipt. "She was with us," one of the fleeing cowards shouted, pointing back. Johnson didn't hesitate. "Cuff her." The handcuffs snapped shut like they'd been waiting for her wrists all day. "Crazy vet, I bet," he muttered to his partner, who nodded with a smirk. Sarah didn't flinch. In her mind, the insults bounced off the steel wall she'd built years ago, the same one that had held when mortar shells screamed overhead and teammates bled beside her in sand-covered silence. She wasn't just silent because she had nothing to say. She was silent because she was calculating. At the station, nobody asked questions. They just typed in answers. Full name, occupation, no mention of her years in the Navy, no nod to the 3 tours, no record of her sniper qualifications, the medals, or the fact that one of the generals she'd saved during a brutal ambush now sat 2 chairs from the president. She said, "Auto mechanic," and they smirked, satisfied. Then came Deputy Adams, walking in with the swagger of a man who believed his clipboard made him king. "So, you're the hero today, huh? Another broken vet playing cop?" he chuckled, flipping through her intake report. "Mechanic. Cute. You sure you didn't snap in the cereal aisle?" Sarah just looked at him, green eyes steady. The silence made him uncomfortable, which pleased her more than she'd admit. Because, while he laughed, she was connecting dots he didn't even know existed. And then she saw it. Behind the desk, a photo of Adams shaking hands at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The backdrop read, "Morrison and Associates Construction." The same company that just 3 weeks ago had laid off 3 disabled veterans under the excuse of budget cuts. A company that had mysteriously donated to Adams' re-election campaign. The kind of coincidence that meant everything to someone who had survived by reading patterns. Sarah had been tracking stories like this for years, collecting names and files the way others collected coins or postcards. But today wasn't about files. It was about timing, so she waited. Because in war, you never fire your best shot first. You wait until the enemy thinks they've won, and then, when they're laughing, when they think you're broken, you aim for the truth. And that's when everything starts to fall. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another incredible story and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Most people in jail wait for a phone call. Sarah waited for a pattern. As the hours crawled past concrete and fluorescent light, her mind clicked into that quiet military mode the average person mistakes for stillness. She wasn't counting time, she was counting coincidences. Morrison Construction. Laid-off veterans. A ribbon-cutting photo with smiles too forced to be innocent. Her gut told her this wasn't random. It was a network, carefully disguised as everyday incompetence. She'd seen this play out overseas, but this time the battlefield wore a badge and a local budget. And just as the pieces were falling into place, the guards barked her name like they were doing her a favor. "You've got a visitor," one grunted. "Don't take all day." Sarah didn't flinch, but her spine straightened. She hadn't made a call, yet someone had found her. The man waiting for her didn't belong in the gray. He wore a modest suit like he hated ties but respected structure. Hair clipped short, shoulders squared, and eyes that scanned without moving too much. He introduced himself with no theatrics. "Marcus Chun, Marine Corps, retired, lawyer now. Veterans Network flagged your name." Sarah studied him. His left wrist bore a scar. Shrapnel, she guessed. His knuckles were bruised not from violence but from life. "How'd you know I served?" she asked quietly. "The way you stood when they brought you in," he replied. "That wasn't fear, that was focus." His eyes held hers. "I've seen that look in mirror glass during a firefight." Marcus opened a folder slowly, like he was handling ammunition. "I made a few calls. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, 15 years Navy, 3 overseas tours, special ops, sharpshooter designation. Your file's not just impressive, it's buried." He paused. "Why didn't you tell them who you were?" Sarah shook her head. "Because they wouldn't hear it. They don't listen to veterans, especially not women, especially not ones who don't beg." Marcus smiled grimly. "They didn't listen, but I did." He laid out photos, printouts, campaign donation records, and articles that connected Sheriff Adams to a string of suspicious veteran arrests. Morrison Construction has been downsizing veterans for 2 years. Then, oddly, those same vets end up behind bars for petty charges, all in jurisdictions connected to Adams or his allies. It's a system. Sarah leaned in, her voice low. "So this isn't just corruption, it's a method." Marcus nodded. "It's targeted and deliberate. They don't attack with guns, they use paper, power, and plausible deniability." Sarah sat back slowly. Her mind wasn't spinning, it was sharpening. Every insult from Adams, every smirk from the guards, every crazy vet label suddenly became more than ignorance. It was policy in disguise. She looked at Marcus and said what she had been thinking since the cuffs went on. "You don't ambush a ghost, you end up hunting your own shadow." As Marcus continued to lay out the pattern, a darker truth emerged. Every arrested veteran had either filed complaints against Morrison, spoken out about city contracts, or turned down favors from local officials. The pieces weren't just fitting, they were screaming. "This isn't about ego," Marcus said. "It's about silencing anyone who knows too much." Sarah didn't rage. She didn't weep. Her fingers tapped quietly on the metal table. She was building a mental map. Target zones, blind spots, weaknesses. Not of buildings, but of behavior. Because that's what she had always done. Combat wasn't about gunfire. It was about pattern recognition. And now she had her first real ally. Marcus leaned forward, tone low but urgent. "We can take them down, but it has to be clean. No scandal, no leaks. We collect, we corroborate, we strike." Sarah nodded once. "We start now." The next day brought another unexpected knock. A guard shuffled awkwardly. "Visitor again." Sarah looked up, curious. When she stepped into the small room, the sight caught her off guard. It was the elderly woman from the parking lot, Eleanor Washington. She wasn't alone. 2 middle-aged women flanked her like quiet bodyguards, their faces filled with gratitude and something stronger, intent. Eleanor walked up and took Sarah's hand. "You saved me," she said, eyes moist but steady. "And now I want to help save you." Sarah tried to wave it off. "Ma'am, this isn't your fight." Eleanor shook her head. "At 78, I've seen too much to stay quiet. My daughter works at City Hall. We've heard the rumors about Adams for years. But now, we've got proof. She slid a folded paper into Sarah's palm. Phone numbers, notes, quiet names that carried loud influence. "And one more thing," Eleanor whispered. "Those two punks that blamed you? Adams lets them out regularly. Word is they do favors for him. Nasty ones." She patted Sarah's hand and smiled. "Just thought you should know. You're not alone." The tide didn't shift in that moment. It surged. Let this land on you clearly. Strength doesn't always storm in with fists. Sometimes it enters through a whisper, through a pattern you weren't supposed to see, through a stranger who sees your scars and still says, "I believe you." Sarah Mitchell wasn't a headline. She was a warning wrapped in restraint, a strategy hidden in silence. They thought they arrested a nobody. What they actually did was pull the pin on a grenade they never learned how to disarm. And if that makes you sit up a little straighter, good. Because injustice doesn't always arrive in dramatic fashion. It often walks through the back door wearing a smile. So if you believe in second chances, in quiet warriors, in battles worth planning, not just fighting, subscribe now and stay with this story. The real strike hasn't even begun. The room was silent when Sarah finally used her one allotted phone call. Not for family. Not for a lawyer. The number she dialed had been memorized, not saved. It wasn't the kind you wrote down. When the voice on the other end answered, crisp and direct, Sarah spoke 3 words that hadn't passed her lips in nearly a decade. Operation Silent Strike. There was a pause, just long enough to taste memory. Then came the voice, sharp but stunned. "Sarah, my God, where have you been?" General Patricia Hayes didn't forget voices. She also didn't forget the sniper who saved her life in Afghanistan. Sarah kept it brief. "I'm in trouble, ma'am. Local level. Corrupt deputy. Something bigger than a misunderstanding. I need a favor." Hayes didn't ask for details. She didn't need them, because the woman on the phone had once pulled her from a burning Humvee with shrapnel in her leg and bullets over. The contrast couldn't have been more insulting. Sarah, once hailed in war rooms, now sitting in a moldy cell because a small-town badge thought she looked suspicious. That's what this was now. War medals versus county politics. And the general wasn't about to let that insult stand. General Hayes didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She picked up her own secure line and started making calls to people with titles that didn't get printed on business cards. Within an hour, 3 different Pentagon officials had contacted the governor's office under vague veteran welfare protocols. By the next morning, a senior advisor at Homeland Security sent a casual inquiry about any federal personnel currently detained in local facilities. Nobody said Sarah's name. Nobody had to, because when the Pentagon whispers, even the most arrogant sheriff starts to sweat. That's the thing about real power. It doesn't raise its voice. It just raises the stakes. Hayes' message was clear without being spoken. Someone important is watching. Someone who remembers. Someone who doesn't appreciate seeing the people who built this country treated like disposable parts. And while Adams had never cared about veterans before, he cared now. Because fear doesn't need formality. Fear just needs a hint. And in that station, surrounded by the same walls he thought protected him, Adams felt something he'd never truly felt before. Accountability. A whisper from the right general can sound louder than a courtroom gavel. By the time Adams summoned Sarah for another interrogation, he was already cracking. His eyes were bloodshot, his collar tighter than usual. The confidence he wore like cologne had started to fade. "Who are you?" he snapped, slamming the folder down. "Who the hell do you know?" Sarah blinked once, slow and calm. "Maybe," she said. "You should have asked before the arrest." Adams leaned in, hoping intimidation still worked. "Don't get clever. I've seen your file now. Doesn't mean anything. You're still in my jail." She tilted her head. "Some uniforms you can take off," she said quietly, "and some are burned into your spine." It wasn't just a comeback. It was a warning. Adams didn't understand legacy because he'd never carried one. He had a badge he could pin to his chest, But Sarah had earned every ounce of respect. Through sweat, fire, and silence, he wanted to break her. But what he didn't know was that he hadn't arrested a woman. He had ignited a mission. And missions, especially the ones Sarah led, didn't end in cells. They ended in exposure. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She didn't need to. Her body rested, but her mind was building the blueprint. Step 1, allies. She had Marcus and Eleanor. More would follow. Step 2, intel. She already had enough connections, enough background, enough inconsistencies in Adam's behavior to justify deeper digging. Step 3, pressure. Hayes had started the flow. Sarah would open the floodgates. She reviewed every moment since the arrest, like a battlefield diagram. The photos on Adam's wall, the expression on the guards' faces when they handed her the phone, the hesitation in the deputy's voice during interrogation, all of it pointed to one thing. Adams didn't just mess up. He messed up with someone who knew how to turn mistakes into leverage. She wasn't just playing defense anymore. She was setting the tempo. This wasn't a waiting game, it was an operation. And in operations, timing is the difference between exposure and erasure. You want to know what makes someone truly powerful? It's not how loud they shout or how many followers they have. It's how precise they can be when it counts. Sarah Mitchell wasn't campaigning. She wasn't crying out for attention. She was watching, planning, and moving with the kind of focus that terrifies people who think control is permanent. And if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed for staying calm when the world screamed at you, that strength is your weapon. What Sarah was about to do wasn't just for herself, it was for every veteran who got pushed aside, for every quiet fighter who was told to sit down, for every person who chose dignity over drama and got punished for it. So, if you're tired of noise winning over honor, stay with this story. Because Sarah's next move won't just flip the script. It'll burn the old one to the ground. And the people who laughed when they cuffed her, they're about to find out what it means to battle someone who's been trained to win before the first shot's even fired. Monday morning was supposed to be routine. At least, that's what Deputy Adams told himself as he adjusted his tie in the cracked mirror above the station sink. He had decided to bury the story before it grew teeth. Stack new charges on Sarah Mitchell, transfer her to the state facility, and let the weight of bureaucracy grind her into silence. He was a master of this playbook. Throw enough paper at a problem, and most people fold. But as the clock struck 10:47 IEM, the rumble outside told a different story. 3 black SUVs pulled up like thunderclouds on wheels, followed by a matte gray Army communications van, and behind them a second line of vehicles carrying people who didn't knock. They entered. Officers paused mid-sip. Typing stopped mid-sentence. Outside, boots hit pavement in practiced rhythm. Inside, tension wrapped around the station like wire. This wasn't protocol, this wasn't normal, and Adams, watching from his window, knew exactly what it was. It wasn't justice arriving, it was judgment, wearing medals. General Patricia Hayes didn't wait to be announced. She didn't remove her sunglasses. She didn't speak to the receptionist. She stepped inside like she'd walked through gunfire more organized than this station. 4 silver stars shimmered on her shoulder. Her eyes found Adams, and they didn't blink. "Where is Sarah Mitchell?" she asked, voice sharp enough to slice the air. Adams stepped forward, stammering, "She's a suspect in an ongoing—" "You arrested Staff Sergeant Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell," the general cut him off. "Medal of Honor recipient, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Navy sniper, 15-year veteran of Special Operations, 3 confirmed saves on Allied officers, including my life." The color drained from Adams's face as quickly as the lies dried in his throat. Hayes kept going, each word a hammer. "You put her in a cage for helping an elderly woman, while the actual criminals walked free. You called her dangerous. You called her broken." Her tone dropped like a gavel. "You arrested a legend and called her a nuisance. That's not justice. That's cowardice in uniform." The room began to shift. Reporters stepped in from the back hallway, camera crews already rolling. Eleanor Washington and her daughters walked in next, heads high, purses tight, followed by Marcus Chun, holding a manila envelope thick with documentation. Someone at City Hall had tipped the local press. Adams looked around, trapped in the fortress he thought he controlled. And then Eleanor did what Sarah hadn't. She pressed play. From her phone, the voice of Adams crackled through the speakers, laughing about cleaning up the town by pushing out veterans who got in the way of Morrison Construction's contracts. His tone was casual, crude, unfiltered. "We'll say they were resisting," he had said. "People eat that up." The silence that followed was nuclear. Every officer standing in that room heard it. Every journalist caught it on tape. Adams reached for a denial, but his hands trembled too hard to hold it. Marcus stepped forward. "This folder's already been scanned. Copies sent to the FBI, Internal Affairs, and the VA Oversight Committee. The pattern is there. The payouts, the arrests, the forged complaints, the veterans you ruined to fund your ego." Sarah emerged from the hallway flanked by 2 MPs. Her hands were no longer in cuffs. Her posture didn't ask for dignity, it expected it. General Hayes turned to her, voice quieter but no less firm. "Sergeant Mitchell, on behalf of the United States Army, I apologize deeply for the way you've been treated. This should have never happened." Sarah met her gaze. "Thank you, General. But I'm not the only one who deserves an apology." She looked at Adams, whose knees now barely held him upright. "You owe an apology to every veteran you crushed under your ego. Everyone you called unstable. Everyone you treated like they were expendable once their uniforms were folded away." She didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She didn't have to, because in that moment, she was the only one in the room who had fought for something bigger than herself. And everyone knew it. Looked this land. What walked into that station wasn't just a general or a convoy or a media storm. What walked in was truth, wearing boots and badges and bank records. Adams had built his kingdom on fear, on quiet deals, on the assumption that no one would ever connect the dots or fight back with discipline. But Sarah Mitchell wasn't interested in revenge. She was delivering proof, and if you've ever been dismissed, profiled, or punished for simply being more than they expected, then this story should light something inside you. Because when corrupt power underestimates principled strength, there's only ever one outcome. They fall. And if you believe the system needs more people like Sarah and fewer like Adams, then stay with this story. Because the collapse you just witnessed, that's just the front door swinging open. The reckoning isn't finished, it's just stepped inside. 6 months later, the applause hit like a thunderclap. But Sarah Mitchell didn't flinch. She stood center stage at the National Veterans Convention, a spotlight pouring down like justice made visible. In her hand was the Civil Courage Award, but she didn't raise it high. She didn't need to. The silence in the room wasn't waiting for a gesture, it was waiting for her words. And when she spoke, her voice didn't tremble. "When they handcuffed me, they thought they were ending something. Turns out, they were starting something bigger than they could imagine." Thousands of veterans filled the auditorium, standing shoulder to shoulder, some with canes, some in dress blues, some with tears shining like medals. Sarah didn't give a speech. She gave a mirror. "I didn't come here to celebrate," she said. "I came here to remind you that our fight doesn't end when we hang up our uniforms. It changes. We change. But our duty, to truth, to each other, that never goes away." Back in Indiana, the story had rewritten itself completely. Sheriff Adams didn't walk out of that station. He was walked out in cuffs. By the time his trial began, the evidence wasn't just stacked, it was sealed, certified, and subpoenaed. The jury didn't deliberate long. 8 years in prison for corruption, civil rights violations, and extortion. But his sentence didn't stop with metal bars. His wife filed for divorce within weeks after seeing the texts. Conversations with business execs mocking veterans as dead weight and laughing about cleaning the city. His children changed their last name. His house, once paid for with shady campaign money, was auctioned off to repay settlement funds, and Morrison Construction collapsed. After media exposure, state investigations, and a full audit, their contracts were pulled. Their name became shorthand for betrayal. Veteran compensation claims followed, over $23 million, 0 cents in restitution, distributed to dozens of families. Adams had built his empire on shortcuts and silence. Sarah dismantled it with truth and time. His kingdom crumbled. Hers had just broken ground. What started as an auto repair shop was now Mitchell Veterans Enterprises, a 3-building complex with 43 employees, all of them veterans, most of them once overlooked. The walls weren't plastered with flags or slogans. They were covered in job boards, training blueprints, therapy calendars. Sarah didn't just fix cars. She rebuilt lives. Engines roared beside laughter. Wrenches passed beside second chances. There were free counseling sessions on Tuesdays, welding classes on Thursdays, and always coffee in the break room. This place wasn't charity, it was discipline with heart. Where others saw rusted bolts, one reporter wrote, Sarah saw anchors for broken lives. Companies lined up now to partner. Even the VA sent reps to observe the model. She had taken pain and shaped it into policy. She had turned injustice into infrastructure. And the men and women who once felt discarded now carried toolboxes instead of trauma. Not because it erased what they'd been through, but because it proved they were still capable of building something that mattered. One afternoon, General Hayes stopped by the shop unannounced. No press, no cameras, just lunch. Sarah had a plate of barbecue in front of her, grease still on her hands. Hayes watched the operation with pride. "I've given out a lot of medals," she said, "but I've never seen one turn into something like this." Sarah smiled, wiping her hands. "Medals are reminders. This place is the result." They sat quietly for a moment, watching a new hire teach another how to recalibrate a timing belt. Then Hayes leaned in. "What do you think was your biggest win?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Legacy," she said. "Not revenge. Revenge burns hot but dies fast. Legacy lasts because it builds while no one's looking." Hayes nodded slowly, eyes gleaming. "You could run for Senate, you know." Sarah chuckled. "Politicians make laws. I'd rather change lives." That was her power, not just that she fought back, but that she chose to build forward. And in a world that celebrates loud victories, Sarah Mitchell became proof that the quiet ones change the most. So here's the message, and it's yours if you're ready to claim it. True strength isn't proven by how hard you hit, it's in how deep you heal. Revenge is easy, but transformation? That's work. That's vision. That's legacy. Sarah didn't stop because she won, she kept going because others hadn't yet. If you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told to stay quiet, this is your signal. Use your story. Use your skills. And if you don't know where to begin, start by standing up, because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people like you, people who remember, rebuild, and rise. Stay with this story. The mission isn't over. It's only beginning. In the corner of a prison cafeteria, where the walls whispered forgotten names and the lights flickered like memories trying to fade, a local reporter leaned forward and asked the question everyone outside wanted answered. "Sheriff Adams, who put you here?" The man once called untouchable looked down at his tray, pushed aside the beans, and muttered, "A mechanic." The silence after that was thick, not from disbelief but from pity. His cellmate, a Vietnam vet with a face like gravel and a voice like rust, chuckled under his breath. "You still don't get it," he said, shaking his head. "She wasn't just a mechanic. You didn't cuff a civilian. You cuffed a mission. You cuffed every veteran this country pretended to forget, and she made sure you remembered." Back at Sarah's home, tucked behind a plain drawer with a broken handle, was a file thick enough to bend the wood. Inside were 12 years' worth of company audits, municipal board minutes, email printouts, and whistleblower accounts, all tied together not with tape but with intention. She hadn't started documenting because she was paranoid. She started because patterns don't lie and silence doesn't heal systems. Every time she saw another veteran let go without cause, she took notes. Every time she heard a rumor about backdoor deals, she made calls. What people mistook for a quiet mechanic's routine was actually the operational rhythm of someone building a map, one that would eventually expose fraud, protect hundreds, and crumble the very structure that tried to bury her. Justice wasn't luck, it was a mission, and Sarah had never lost one. They thought she was reacting. What they never saw coming was that she'd been preparing longer than they'd been abusing power. The ripple effect didn't end at the station, or even at the courtroom. The fallout reached every corner of the country. Within 6 months, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle pushed through bipartisan reform, mandating military background checks before arrest, creating veteran support liaisons at police stations, and passing new protections against wrongful detainment. In 48 states, commissions were launched to investigate prior cases involving dismissed veterans. In all 50, training protocols were rewritten, and in the middle of this political shift, Sarah's name was floated for a Senate run, endorsed by generals, veterans, educators, and even a few journalists who once wrote her off. But she declined, not out of fear, out of focus. "The Senate writes laws," she said, "but I get to write futures, one hire at a time." Her impact didn't depend on power, it depended on proximity. She wanted to be where people needed her, not behind a podium. Because change doesn't always need a title, it just needs a pulse. At the final Veterans Gala of the year, Sarah took the stage for the last time. Not for awards, not for applause, just for truth. She held no script, no fancy introduction, just a quiet smile and a story that everyone thought they already knew. "They called me just a mechanic," she began, eyes sweeping the crowd. "But steel is forged, not born. I chose grease because it calms me. I chose the shadows because I was tired of watching people burn in the spotlight." The room held its breath as she continued. "They arrested me because they thought I was small. They saw dirt on my hands and thought that meant weakness. But here's the thing. What looks like dirt might be foundation, and sometimes a little mess is how you rebuild." She paused, just long enough. "I wasn't fighting for justice. I was proving we still deserve it." No one clapped, not immediately, not out of disrespect, but because some moments deserve silence so they can echo deeper. She walked off stage the same way she had walked through every fire they tried to throw at her, quietly, purposefully, and already thinking about the next mission. And somewhere in that crowd, a young veteran whispered to a friend, "That's who I want to be like." Not because she was famous, but because she made justice look like something you could live. Not wear, not wave, live. So if you've ever been told your voice was too small, or your past too messy, or your service too forgotten, remember Sarah Mitchell. Remember the mechanic who brought down corruption with a phone call, a folder, and a fire that wouldn't go out. And if this story moved you, then don't just be inspired. Be activated. Speak. Document. Build. Because the battle isn't about vengeance. It's about making sure no one else ever has to fight alone. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone underestimates you, they'll realize too late they didn't know your whole story. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.